The day she saved a man's life on the hospital floor, her husband was waiting in the corridor with papers that said she owed him hers. She had her stethoscope around her neck. She had her white coat pressed and clean. She had the name badge pinned above her heart, Dottore Marose, and she had earned every letter of that title with blood, with tears, and with years of sacrifice that most people will never understand. But none of that mattered to the man. Standing at the end of that corridor, to Chidi Mensah, she was not a doctor. She was an investment, and investments, he believed, did not get to walk away. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, cold as early morning and sharp. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, and when Amara turned and saw him standing there, suit and tie, arms folded across his chest, eyes flat and certain, she stopped walking. Her heart did not race. It did not sink. It simply went quiet in her chest, the way a held breath goes quiet before it is finally released. She had known this moment was coming. She had dreaded it for months. But now that it was here, standing in front of her in polished shoes and cold silence, something unexpected happened inside Amara Uzi. She stood up straighter. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story like this one. And tell us from where you are listing our stories. Now let us go back to the beginning. Chidi Mensah was 34 years old when he married Amara, and already he had built a life that most men twice his age could only dream of. His important logistics company had offices in 3 cities. He drove a black Mercedes-Benz that gleamed like a mirror even in the rain. His penthouse apartment in the city overlooked the river, and when guests came for dinner, they ate from imported dishes under a chandelier that cost more than most people earn in a year. Chidi was not cruel in the way that monsters are cruel. He did not shout. He did not break things. His cruelty was quieter, more dangerous, the kind that wears the face of generosity and calls itself love. He genuinely believed that, because he provided, he owned. That was the wound at the center of Chidi Mensah. Not greed, but a deep and ancient belief that money and love were the same thing. That what a man paid for, a man possessed. His mother, Vivian Mensah, had raised him to believe this. Mama Vivia was a sharp-eyed woman with a long memory and a short patience for anyone she considered below her son's station. She wore her wealth like armor. She spoke softly, but there was always a hook inside her words, and she never threw one without meaning to catch something. And then there was Amara. Amara had grown up in a 2-room house in a village where the roads turned to mud when the rains came. Her father had been a teacher, a good man, a quiet man, who died of a treatable illness because the treatment cost money they did not have. That death had broken something inside Amara and rebuilt it into something harder, into a determination. She had told herself at 17 years old, standing by her father's grave in the red dust, that no one in her care would die of something curable. No one. Not while she had hands and a mind and breath in her body. She worked 2 jobs to finish her undergraduate degree. She tutored children on weekends. She ate plain rice when the money ran thin. And when she sat her entrance examinations for medical school, she scored so high that her professor called her to his office just to ask if she was certain of her future, because whatever she chose to do, she would be exceptional at it. She was certain. Medical school costs more than certainty. That was where Chidi entered the story. They had met at a mutual friend's wedding. Amara in a simple green dress, laughing with her friend at the table, and Chidi watching from across the room with an expression he had never quite been able to explain. Not attraction exactly, but recognition, as if something in her reminded him of something he had lost. He pursued her with patience and with genuine warmth. In those days, Chidi was capable of warmth, and when she told him, 6 months into their courtship, about her dream of medical school and the wall of money standing between her and that dream, he had reached across the table, taken her hand in both of his, and said words she would never forget. "I will take care of it, Amara, all of it. You just focus on becoming the doctor you were born to be." She had wept, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming weight of being seen. They married the following year, and Chidi Mensah paid for everything: the tuition, the textbooks, the accommodation near the hospital, the examination fees, the long years of study when Amara worked 80-hour days and came home hollow with exhaustion but burning with purpose. He paid for all of it, and with each payment, something shifted inside him, something slow and quiet and dangerous. The first sign came in her second year of medical school. It was small, the kind of thing a person might dismiss as nothing. Amara had mentioned a study group she was joining, late evenings at the university, library with classmates. Chidi had gone still. Not angry, just still. And then he had said, with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes, "You spend a lot of time with those people. Are they worth more to you than coming home?" Amara had laughed it off. She would spend the next 5 years trying to laugh things off. The day Amara graduated from medical school, the sky was a clean and brilliant blue, and she stood on the steps of the university in her black gown and her mortarboard hat. And she cried. She cried in a way she had not cried since her father's funeral. Great, heaving, grateful sobs, because she had done it. She had done what she promised. That 17-year-old girl, standing in the red dust. She had done it. Chidi was there. He stood at the edge of the crowd, hands in his pockets, watching. When she came to him, he embraced her. He told her he was proud. And then he said something that made the warmth drain from that perfect blue day. "Now that this is finished, we can talk about starting a family properly. You have had your time. Now it is time for our time." Her time. As if the years she had spent healing and learning and building knowledge that would save lives, as if all of it was a hobby and indulgence, something she had been permitted. Amara, Saith? Nothing. She smiled, because she did not yet know how to say out loud what was forming in her chest. She accepted a residency position at the city's largest teaching hospital. This was not a small thing. The hospital was prestigious. The residency was competitive. She had been chosen from hundreds of applicants because of her brilliance and her scores and her interviews in which she spoke of her father, of the village, of the belief that medicine was a moral obligation, not merely a profession. When she told Chidi, the silence in their apartment stretched long and cold. "You accepted it without asking me," he said. "Chidi, it is my career, your career." He said the words slowly, as if tasting something unpleasant. "Everything you have, Amara, everything I made possible. Your career is built on my money. My sacrifice. Did you consider that before signing your name to their paper?" Time stopped. The world stopped. Everything stopped. And in that cold, quiet moment, Amara finally heard what Chidi had been saying for years underneath all the other words. She had been paying rent all along. She had simply not known the currency until now. She took the residency. They fought about it for weeks. Mama Vivian called the house and spoke to Amara in that soft, hooked voice of hers. A good wife does. Not put her ambitions above her home, my dear. Chidi has done so much for you. Is this gratitude? But Amara went. She tied her laces, pinned her badge, walked into that hospital, and she did not look back. It was during her 3rd month of residency that she found the folder. She had come home, early a rare thing, a gift of cancelled evening rounds. She was looking in the filing drawer for their car insurance documents when her fingers found a manila folder she did not recognize. She pulled it out, opened it. Inside was a document, legal letterhead, her name at the top. It was a draft agreement, dated from the year they were married, before she had even started medical school, in which Amara agreed, in exchange for Chidi funding her education, to relinquish any independent financial decisions during the marriage, to maintain primary domestic responsibility, regardless of career demands. And her eyes stopped moving here. She read it twice, 3 times. 2. Repay the full cost of her education with interest. Should she ever abandon the marital home or fail to fulfill wifely obligations as agreed. She sat down on the floor of that study. The carpet was thick and soft beneath her. The apartment smelled of the candles Chidi liked to burn in the evenings, sandalwood and cedar. And Amara sat in the middle of all that softness and all that warmth, holding a document that told her that her husband had married her with a contract in his pocket. She had never signed it, but he had written it. He had thought about it enough to have it drafted. What else had he thought? She did not confront him. Not yet. She was her father's daughter. Careful, methodical. She put the folder back, exactly as she had found it, took a photograph of every page with her phone, and said nothing. Over the next 3 weeks, Amara began to look. Quietly, carefully. The way a good doctor looks at a patient they suspect is hiding something, watching for the small signs that do not match the story being told. She found the first piece of evidence on an evening when Chidi was out with clients. She sat at his desk with the careful stillness of a woman who has decided to know the truth, and she opened his laptop. The password was their wedding anniversary. She had known it for years. And in his email, in a folder he had labeled with a name she did not recognize, she found a thread of messages with a lawyer. The messages were old, going back to before their wedding, and they discussed clearly, plainly, without any attempt at concealment, because Chidi had never imagined she would look. A strategy for ensuring that any professional income Amara generated during the marriage would be subject to what the lawyer called contribution recoupment. He had been building a cage before she had even moved in. She sat back in his chair. The leather was expensive and cool against her back. There. City blinked at her through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and Amara breathed through her nose and out through her mouth, the way they had taught her to do with frightened patience, until the shaking in her hands was still. She needed a witness, someone who knew Chidi, someone whose word would carry weight. Thought of Kofi. Kofi Asante had been Chidi's business partner for 7 years, before a falling out over a contract had sent them in separate directions. He was a quiet, broad-shouldered man who spoke carefully and meant every word. He had always been kind to Amara, the kind of kindness that had nothing to do with Chidi, which was rare in Chidi's world. She met him for coffee on a Thursday morning, her hospital badge tucked in her pocket, her hands wrapped around a mug that steamed in the cold air. She told him, carefully, what she had found. Kofi was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Amara, I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago." He looked at the table, then at her. "Before Chidi proposed to you, he spoke to me about Italiano. He told me he had found the right woman, someone brilliant, someone with potential, and that supporting her through school would be the best investment he ever made." Not those words exactly, but the meaning. He paused. "I told him that was not love," he said. "I did not understand business." The coffee had gone cold in her hands. He called it, Kofi said quietly, "a long-term asset." A long-term asset. She was not a wife. She had never been a wife in Chidi's mind. She was a portfolio entry, something to be funded, managed, and eventually liquidated on his terms. That evening she drove to the hospital not because she was on duty, but because she needed to stand in a place where she was simply Dr. Amara Osei, where no one looked at her and saw an investment, or a debt, or a possession. She walked the wards slowly, checked on patients she knew, spoke soft words to a young woman recovering from surgery who was frightened and alone, and she stayed until the fear inside her chest had been replaced with something cleaner. Purpose. 2 days later, Chidi came to her with flowers, yellow roses, her favorite. She had told him so once, years ago, and that he still remembered surprised her. He sat beside her on the couch and spoke with unusual softness about how he had been thinking, about how perhaps he had been too controlling, about how he wanted them to start again. He held her hand. He said he was proud of her. She looked at him, at the face she had known for years, at the eyes she had once thought were full of warmth. She said, "Chidi, did you have a legal agreement drafted before we married?" The flowers were still in his hand. Something crossed his face, fast, like a shadow, and then it was gone. replaced by the calm, smooth expression she had seen him use in negotiations. "That was years ago," he said. "It was never used. It was just, you called me a long-term asset." He stood up, and the warmth was gone, and there was the real face beneath it. Not monstrous, worse than monstrous. "Certain, everything I gave you came from somewhere. Amara, nothing, is free. You, of all people, should know that." She had believed, until that moment, that the unsent contract was the worst of it. She went to see Mama Vivian the following day. She sat in the older woman's parlor, all cream and mahogany, lace curtains that diffused the afternoon light, and she asked, as calmly as she could, whether Mama Vivian had known about the contract. Mama Vivian set down her teacup. She folded her hands in her lap. "I advised him to have it written," she said. There was no guilt in her voice, only the conviction of a woman who had made a decision and was not interested in being questioned about it. "You were a village girl with ambition and no means. I told my son that there is nothing wrong with the transaction as long as both people understand the terms. I did not know the terms. You knew that he was paying. That is enough." Mama Vivian picked up her teacup again. "In my day, a woman was grateful. She did not go looking for exits." Amara stood. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but it filled the room. "My father paid for my mother's meals. My father bought her cloth for her dresses. By your reasoning, she belonged to him like property. But I watched them every day of my childhood, Mama Vivian, and I never once saw a ledger. I only saw two people who chose each other every single day. Freely, that is the only transaction that is love." She walked out of that parlor and did not look back. The confrontation happened on a Sunday. Amara had arranged for Kofi to be present, not as a witness in any formal sense, but because she knew that Chidi Wen Cornad became very good at rewriting the past, and she wanted someone else in the room who remembered the truth. She laid the photographs of the documents on the dining room table. She placed her phone beside them, with the email thread open, and she looked at him with the steady eyes of a woman who has already made her decision. Chidi looked at the documents. He looked at Kofi. He looked at Amara. "This is not what it looks like," he said. "Chidi." Her voice was very calm. "You drafted a legal agreement to treat my education as a loan with punitive repayment terms. You discussed my earning potential with your lawyer as an asset to be controlled. Your mother confirmed she advised you to do this before we married." "Protected myself," he said. "I gave you everything. Everything. And I had no guarantee you would not simply walk away once you had what you needed. So you built a trap." She said, "I built a foundation. You built a trap." She said it again, not louder, but with greater weight. "And you called it love. And you made me believe it was love. And I spent years feeling guilty for wanting to simply be a doctor, for wanting what I had worked my entire life for. After everything I sacrificed, you sacrificed money." She stood too, and she was not smaller than him in this moment. She was not smaller at all. "I sacrificed my father's memory. I sacrificed sleep and certainty and years of my life. I sacrificed the feeling of owing no one anything, which is the most precious thing a person can own. And you have never once considered that your sacrifice and my sacrifice were not the same, because yours came with a receipt, and mine came from love." Kofi said nothing. He did not need to. Chidi's jaw worked. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, stripped of the negotiator's polish. "You would have been nothing without me. Then I will go and be nothing," she said. "And we will see." Friends, if this story is moving you, if Amara's courage is stirring something in your heart, please subscribe now. Came to the hospital 2 days later. That was the moment we began with the corridor, the white coat, the badge, the man with papers in his hand. He had filed for a legal claim, citing repayment. Repayment. It was the contract, not the original unsigned one, but a new version drafted by his lawyer and filed formally through the courts. He stood in that hospital corridor as if he owned the floor. She walked on. Amara did not flinch. You came to my workplace. You were never treating it as a home. You were treating it as an investment property, and I was the tenant with debts. You do not have a lawyer. I do now." She walked away from him in that corridor, stethoscope swaying, name badge catching the light, and she did not look back. The legal process was not quick. It does not bend. Amara's lawyer, a sharp, quietly furious woman named Abina, who had taken the case the same afternoon, Amara called, submitted the email evidence that no signed agreement existed, that the education had been presented as a gift within a marriage. Investment in human capital revealed beyond reasonable doubt that the petitioner had entered this marriage with the stated intention of financial control rather than partnership. The judge was a small woman with reading glasses and an expression like someone who had heard every story and was not fooled by any of them. She read every document carefully. She set them down. She looked at Chitty's lawyer. She looked at Abina. She dismissed Chitty's claim entirely. Amara was sitting in the courtroom when the ruling was read. She was in her civilian clothes, a white blouse, and a blue wrap skirt, because she had not wanted to seem to be claiming the authority of the white coat. She wanted to be seen simply as a woman, simply as a person, nothing more. When the judge said the words "claim dismissed," Amara did not cheer. She did not cry out. She closed her eyes. And behind her closed eyes, she saw her father's face, young, as she remembered it from the early years, laughing at some small thing her mother had said, reaching across the table to touch her mother's hand. Not a transaction. Not an investment. Just a man who loved a woman freely, and showed it every day without a ledger. She felt his absence like an ache in her sternum. She also felt, for the first time in years, that she had not let him down. When she opened her eyes, Abina was squeezing her shoulder. Outside the courthouse, the sun was warm, and the air smelled of rain on dry earth. That particular sweetness that rises from the ground when the sky finally gives what the land has been waiting for. Amara stood on the steps and breathed it in. Her colleague and friend, Dr. Funmi, had been waiting at the bottom of the steps with 2 cups of tea in paper. Cups, and an expression of fierce, quiet pride. "Well," Dr. Funmi said. "It is done," Amara said. Dr. Funmi pressed a cup into her hands. It was warm and smelled of ginger and honey. "Then let us get back to the hospital. We have a ward round at 4. Amara laughed. It was a real laugh. Full and free and unexpected, rising out of her like something that had been waiting a long time for permission. "Yes," she said, "let USA go." As for Chidi Mensa, the ruling was public record. In the business world, where reputation moves faster than truth, the story spread. Partners who had respected him began to look at him differently. Mama Vivienne, who had told her son all his life that money was the language of love, stopped taking his calls for a month. Not from shame, perhaps she was not built for shame, but because the outcome she had engineered had made her son look foolish in front of people who mattered to her, and that, in Mama Vivian's world, was the unforgivable sin. Chitty's logistics company did not collapse. He was too shrewd for that. But it shrunk, and the man who had stood in a hospital corridor with papers in his hand, certain that he owned the woman walking away from him, found himself alone in a penthouse apartment overlooking a river, eating from imported dishes under a chandelier, with no one across the table from him to see how much he had. 1 year passed. The city changed in the small ways. Cities always change. New buildings rising, old ones repainted, the traffic heavier on certain roads and lighter on others. But in the wards of the teaching hospital, things were steady and purposeful, and Dr. Amara Osei had become the kind of doctor that patients asked for by name. She had moved into a small apartment, smaller than the penthouse, so much smaller, with 1 bedroom and a kitchen that caught the morning light and a balcony, where she kept 2 terracotta pots of basil and 1 of mint. It smelled alive, that apartment. It smelled like choices made freely. Her younger brother, Emmanuel had started his own engineering studies, and Amara was helping with his fees. Not as a transaction, not with a contract in her pocket, but because she had promised their father's memory that the door she had walked through would stay open behind her. Emmanuel called her every Sunday, and they spoke for long, warm hours about everything and nothing, and she could hear in his voice the same stubborn flame she recognized from the mirror. She was completing her residency specialization in internal medicine. She was writing a research paper about preventable deaths in lower-source communities, the kind of deaths that had taken her father. When it was submitted to the journal, her supervisor, Dr. Funmi, read the dedication page and said nothing for a long moment. Then she looked up and said simply, "He would be proud." "I know," Amara said. "I know he would." Kofi Asante sent her a message on the day the court ruling anniversary passed. It said only, "You are always worth more than any price he could have named." She replied with a single line, "We all are." And Chidi? It was Amara's nurse, Essie, who told her one morning that she had seen Chidi Mensah at a clinic across the city, a smaller practice. Nothing like the teaching. Hospital waiting in the common area with the look of a man who had arrived somewhere he had not planned to be. She did not know if he was ill, or if he was there for a family member, or if the city had simply redistributed him to his right-sized place. It did not matter. Amara listened. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel grief. She felt, quietly and completely, that the story was over. There was one last moment, and it happened on a Tuesday. She was leaving a late shift, walking through the hospital corridor, the same corridor, when a young woman stopped her, a student nurse, 20 years old at most, with large, worried eyes and a clipboard clutched to her chest. She said, "Dr. I am sorry to bother you. Primera wanted to ask, me. People say you are the one to ask. How do you do it? How do you keep going when it is so hard and everyone expects so much, and sometimes it feels like..." She trailed off. Embarrassed, Amara stopped walking. She looked at this young woman, her younger self, in every important way, and she thought of her father's grave, and the years it had cost her, and the man who had believed the cost was his to collect. She said, "You keep going because you know why you started, and you make sure that the reason you started is yours, only yours. Nobody can take a reason from you that belongs to you. Do you understand?" She walked out of that hospital into the night air, which was cool and smelled of rain coming, and she looked up at a sky full of stars, and she thought, every stepping stone to her dream. But he cannot purchase the dream itself. He cannot invoice the years of sleepless study. He cannot put a price on the child who stood beside a grave and made a promise to herself and kept it against everything, all the way to the end. What Chidi Mensah never understood, what he could not understand, because he had been taught to speak only in the language of accounts, is that love is not a ledger. The moment you start keeping score, it has already stopped being love. Amara Osei had paid every debt she owed, and the only creditor whose opinion had ever truly mattered, believe in herself, she had not let him down. Thank you for sitting with us through this story, friends. Thank you for following Amara all the way to the end. If her journey moved something in you, if it reminded you of your own strength, or the strength of someone you love, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell so you never miss a story. Every story we tell is a fire, and we need you there to keep it burning. Watch our next story right here. It is waiting for you.